Today on The Nation Speaks, if you don't know what an ESG credit rating is, you should. You'll be shocked how it impacts just about everything, as James Lindsay, a critical theory expert, explains. Then in America Q&A, we ask a related question. Do you understand why farmers are protesting in the Netherlands? Finally, in our second America Q&A, in a climate of extreme media distrust, how much do you do your own research into information you see online? Hello and welcome to The Nation Speaks. I'm your host, Cindy Drucker. Hidden in a banker's acronym is a force that's shaping more of your world than you probably know. ESG, or Environmental, Social, and Governance, is a three-pronged set of criteria used by the investment community to score how devoted companies are to pursuing ESG goals. The criteria are defined by S&P, Moody's, Morningstar, and other ratings agencies. There's no one way to measure, and a lot of ingredients go into the soup. It's not new, but it has slipped under the radar for a lot of us until quite recently. Well, we're going to dive into what you should know about ESGs. Joining us now is James Lindsay, who started out as a mathematician. He is now a leading expert on critical theory and Marxist ideology and the founder of New Discourses. He's also the author of 8 books, his latest, The Truth About Critical Race Theory and Praxis. James, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So according to my introduction, you're not an economist. So why should we talk to you about investment scores like ESG?
Well, the truth is you shouldn't have to talk to me about investment scores like ESG, but the problem is that the people who know about these things either aren't talking about them or are lying about them. So it requires talking to outsiders who bothered to read some of their books and some of their publications over the past, 20 years or so as ESG has come into prominence.
So explain to us, what are ESGs?
It's a scoring system that's used to track, or at least originally was used to track, the likelihood of a corporation being a good bet for a long-term investment. So, that obviously makes sense if you're going to work within index funds or mutual funds or any of this kind of pension fund planning and investment, that you want to know which companies are going to be long-term kind of cash cows and which companies are likely to be flashes in the pan that, come into existence and go away. And so in the early 2000s, a few very socially minded, socially activist investors got together and thought up this idea that, well, it's probably the case that companies that are bad at environmental policy, bad with social responsibility, and bad at corporate governance are going to be bad bets in long-term investment. And therefore, we could possibly create a score that judges how well they might perform in the long term. Now, of course, the rule is once you start measuring something, it becomes a manipulation. And so that feedback loop comes back into play on the other end, and it becomes a thing that corporations chase because there's an incentive to get listed with a high ESG score. And it becomes a tool for these kind of big investment firms that have, access to lots of other people's money to begin to leverage that we want corporations that behave certain ways that are likely to meet these measurements. And so there's this level of artificiality immediately that gets brought in once it becomes a measure that has consequences attached to it. But that's the beginning point of what ESG was. That's the charitable explanation. It's not clear that it works. It's not clear that having a high ESG score does, in fact, or even if it was an open-ended process, having good environmental, social, and governance policy translates into good long-term profitability for a corporation.
Okay, so that's one question, whether there's actually an ROI for the investor or if it's just fashionable. You said they've been around for about a decade or over a decade. We haven't heard a lot, 2 decades, thank you. We haven't heard a lot about it until recently. In the case of Sri Lanka, which we'll get into, but also Elon Musk tweeted in May, Exxon is rated top 10 best in the world for environment, social, and governance ESG by S&P 500, while Tesla didn't make the list. ESG is a scam. It has been weaponized by phony social justice warriors. Can you explain that weaponization to us? Do you agree with Elon?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I would actually go a little further and say that it was created by social justice warriors in the first place, but I don't know that they had a full-scale weaponization in mind. The way that ESG has been weaponized is once you have a measurement that then is attached to, say, a belief about long-term profitability, and then a lot of investment capital firms decide we're going to use this measurement and we're going to therefore reward companies by, say, buying lots of their shares with other people's money through our passive mutual or index fund programs. We're going to reward companies for compliance. You now all of a sudden have a tool for weaponization. And so what you have going on now, whatever ESG was or intended to be in its very beginning, though it was intended to be a tool to leverage social responsibility onto corporations from its very beginnings, is a tool that is being used to leverage social responsibility. So Elon Musk said things and did things that they didn't like. He tweeted things they didn't like. He publicly spoke up about things they didn't like. He tried to buy or is buying, or whatever the status of that is, Twitter, which they obviously didn't want to lose control of. And so they said quite arbitrarily that Tesla doesn't have a good social score associated with it because of the way that Elon Musk is behaving, and then they drummed up some claims about things that happen at Tesla to say that it's not satisfying its ESG, the S portion, the social justice portion of its ESG score. So they kicked it off of the S&P 500 index listing. And what does that do? Well, that disincentivizes investment from people who pay attention to these things, but it also takes out all of that pension fund money out of a significant winner of a company arbitrarily, because the people in charge don't like Elon Musk, what it boils down to. And even if they can make some argument, it doesn't matter, because it's obvious that you can see that this is exactly what they can do with it. If they decide that they don't like the CEO of Disney or the CEO of Coca-Cola or something that those companies are doing, they can say, listen, all this money is going to get taken away from you. All this investment capital, we're going to raise, rates. All these things are going to come bad to you if you don't play ball according to what we say good environmental policy, good social policy, and proper corporate governance policy looks like. And Tesla is a perfect example. So Elon Musk is completely right. This thing is a scam. The scam is used to enable a financial cartel, and that cartel, because it manages possibly, I've heard numbers anywhere between $6 and $20 trillion of primarily people's pensions, people's retirements, other people's money, not their own money. They're not investing their own money. They're investing the retirement funds primarily. They have the leverage to be able to use this like a gun to the head, a financial gun to the head of any corporation that doesn't do what it wants them to do. And this is a blatant weaponization. In fact, it's racketeering is what it is. This is criminal racketeering using what looks like a responsible measurement tool as the mechanism, so nobody's directly responsible for engaging in what is really a mob shakedown of corporations.